Hey, hey, hey.
Christy, how you doing?
I'm good. Good and lost. No, let me stop. I feel better. I was able to work with Larry this morning and I was able to get some stuff better understood. I was working on something and I had one tick that was out of place. And so I spent hours yesterday and then me and Larry, I showed Larry my code today and he told me to move to one thing and then everything fell into place. I was like, oh my God.
All right, sometimes it's like that.
That's very satisfying, isn't it?
Yes, but I just like a tick, a comma, whatever those things are up there. I can't even think of it right now. That's a lot. When you just spinning your wheels and spinning your wheels, you hitting send or hitting enter, and then it's not coming back, man.
Hi,
Yeah.
folks.
Hello.
Hello.
How are y'all doing?
Pretty good.
Between the
Hello.
allergies and the homework, I don't know. It's been rough.
Been rough. Anything I can help with?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So no, wait a minute. I was lost, but now I'm found. No, I'm just joking. But I was lost on one part, but I was able to get to where I needed to be. So I think that exercises, the homework exercises that were, I think, left from Thursday. I think that that might be where I am. I don't know about anybody else. So that's my.
Okay. I'm curious, which exercises from Thursday or just all of them?
So I was stuck on the exercise from Wednesday, and then it was a tick. So I reached out to Latonia yesterday. I was on with her for over an hour, and it was just one little thing. And then I worked on it with her and by myself. Couldn't get it, and so then I found. So then today I was on with Larry, and it was one little thing, and then he told me. So once he showed me that, then I was on a roll. So I was able to get to the end of Wednesday, and then I got through the authorization exercise. So because Friday I took the day off because my brain was hurting. And so the one exercise, I got through the authorization part, and then now I just haven't, as I said, that's where I am. So I know I need to keep going. That's so that was just saying where I was, and I didn't know where anybody else was.
Okay. Well, if there's anything in particular you'd like me to help you out with while we have the office hours, be more than willing to go through it. Or if anybody else has anything that they'd like to talk about, that works too. I'm at your all's disposal. So
Well, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of the concepts that were introduced with the networking and API. Implementing it, I got to go back and look at notes for the specifics of, just syntax and how to do everything. So, I mean, I'm happy to just hear anyone's questions, and anything you go over will be a refresher for me.
cool. Well, I'm guessing, Christy, if you're having difficulty with something, somewhat other people probably are too. So if there's anything you want to go through, I think it would be a benefit to the whole class.
Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to, let's see, let's open.
Actually, I do want to mention one thing, which is that I did sort of on purpose try to make the homework assignment from Thursday a little bit more challenging.
Why would you do that?
Well, you guys have been doing so well, and I was like, I gotta give like some of these folks a challenge here. So,
You
like,
didn't need to
maybe I
challenge
went a
us.
little too
You
far.
didn't need to challenge, right? You might have went over the top. You didn't need to challenge us just right yet. Let me see. So I'm going to let me open up. I was so it's so funny because when on Thursday when people were doing their homework and they were talking, I was like, okay, I was looking at what I was doing. I was like, it can, I knew I had because the day before it was very easy, like you said. So I was like, well, I'm gonna listen to other people asking questions, so I should be able to just listen and then pick up. And I'm telling you, when I got by myself, I was like, oh my God. So yeah.
So okay, but besides that, I'm right where Christy's at. So if we can, I don't know, go through it together, we should be
Yeah.
all right. I don't have
Yeah.
much time though, because I gotta get ready for work soon. So I hate that.
Okay.
Oh, let me, okay, so I have my screen. I'll share my screen. So
Okay.
this is, I have this as week 10, day 4. And so I have the exercise up too. So here it was. So it was in this one. Into JavaScript as a using native defined tools. So it said, so you said now what?
Just to be clear,
Seems
you
like
said week
Spanish. This seems like Spanish.
you said week 10, day 4. This is week 10, day 3. It's the one that we were
Right,
doing.
but the way that we've been set up, Monday was day 1. We just didn't have class. So technically Tuesday was day 2. And so even though you guys loaded it that way, it was for us the way we've been normally doing stuff. So I was just trying to like follow suit.
Yeah, okay. So what I will say then is I have all my stuff offset weirdly because I was expecting to be given a full week, and then I was given like 3 days and a day.
Right.
So yeah, just to be clear, to make sure we're all talking about the same thing, what I pasted in chat, that is the homework from Thursday.
This isn't the homework from Thursday?
That what I just pasted in chat is the homework from Thursday, and that should be
Yeah.
what I linked, unless I screwed something up.
Yeah, this is the one that I wanna go
Or
through.
the same one? So I was able to get the authorization, the first one. I was able to do that one on my own. And
Okay.
I think that if you help me, if we refresh on exercise 2, I think that I'll be able to continue because like I said, I was stuck on the day before.
Okay. Real quick though, Wayne, were you able to get number 1? I just want to, since you said you have to go, I just don't want to leave you out in the cold here if you need help.
Let me see. Postal can. I think I did.
Okay.
I think I did.
It should mostly just be Postman stuff. So really the only new sort of thing there is just some of the techniques around how you format that header. But at the end of the day, that was supposed to be a relatively straightforward, like type stuff into Postman, click submit, make requests sort of exercise.
Right. I think I got that. Definitely got
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. So it sounds like Christy, would you'd get some benefit if I went through exercise number 2.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Let me share my screen here. Okay, so in the JavaScript console, convert the string into a JavaScript object using the native JSON tools in the browser. Okay, so this here is a JSON string. This is not a JavaScript object. This is a bunch of data that's inside of some single quotes here. So this is a string just as much as like quote hello world quote is a string.
Mhm.
Just happens to have some special characters in it.
Sorry.
Okay. So I'm going to go over here. Is this big enough or should I make it bigger?
That's big enough.
That's big enough.
Okay. So I'm going to paste this over here just so I have it. Okay. Now, let me jump over to, I was preparing for Monday. Let me see if I can get back to where we were here. JSON. And I want JSON tools, JSON decoding. Yeah. Okay. So remember that there's sort of 2 representations of this data. You have data that's encoded as JSON that is a string. And that's what we're looking at here.
Mhm.
And then you have the corresponding version of the JSON when it's decoded into JavaScript.
Mhm.
And that looks like sort of JavaScript arrays and objects. And those are native JavaScript data types. When something is a JSON string, you can't really interrogate it. Like it's just sort of like a string. So like you can like get the first character of it or something, but you can't just do something like say, what's inside of the key menu? Like this is a string, you can't really do anything with it. Once you sort of parse it as, use the JSON parsing tools to convert it into JavaScript sort of primitives, then at that point you can do that sort of interrogation. You can say, okay, what's at this key menu? And it'll give you back sort of this whole object here.
Okay.
So that's, I just want to clarify, like that's really the difference between those 2 formats. And what I'm asking here in exercise 2 is in the JavaScript console, convert this string into a JavaScript object using the native JSON tools in the browser. So go from a string, the string representation, to the JavaScript object representation. Sort of the representation lets you interrogate that thing to sort of get keys and values out of it, all that sort of stuff. So going back over to the presentation here, there's sort of 2 directions. There's converting the string to the JSON, there's converting the string to the JavaScript object. And then there's the converted JavaScript object to a string. So these are sort of the 2 directions. Like you can go one way and then you can go back the other way again. So when you want to go from string to native JavaScript object, so in this case, data is a native JavaScript object, you want to use json.parse. So json.parse takes as a parameter a string, and that string contains within it a bunch of JSONs, just like this here. And then when you run it through json.parse, it's going to convert that to be a JavaScript object. So in this case, an object with a key of hello, a value of world, a key of foo, and a value of an array with 1, 2, and 3 in it. JSON.stringify does the exact opposite. So JSON.stringify, you can see here, this isn't a string. There's no single quotes or quotes around it in any sort of way here. This is a JavaScript object. And what JSON.stringify will do is it'll take this JavaScript object and it will convert it into a JSON string. So text here, I'm logging out text and I get this sort of JSON representation here. So most of the sort of wrangling one does with JSON is one of these 2 things: converting data that's in a JSON string, parsing it into a JavaScript object, or then the other way around, converting a JavaScript object into a JSON string. Okay, does that all sort of make sense at a high level?
Yeah. Okay, so JSON, when you put something into a JSON string, it parses it into a JavaScript object.
When you use json.parse and pass it a JSON string, it converts it into a JavaScript object.
So a JSON string passed, you're saying passed through.
So
Yep.
question. So
Yeah.
JSON not parse, you would put the string within that to convert it to JavaScript?
JavaScript object. Yeah, exactly. So for example here, if I do JSON.parse text, I get something like this. Or alternatively, if I do something like JSON string, something like this. Okay. Object. So this is a JSON string. I do type of JSON string. It's a string. And then I can JSON.parse that JSON string. So I'll store that into something like JavaScript object. And then if I go type of JavaScript object, that's an object. And if I console.log JavaScript object, now I get something that I can sort of play with here. I can do something like JavaScript object.foo.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, so JSON.parse text that. So JavaScript object equals const JavaScript object equals JSON.parse. So that equals a JSON string. That I don't know what line that is. So I guess
Yeah.
this right. So to clarify, because I think this is where a lot was lost. You parse, JSON gets parsed into a form of JavaScript, but then when you do the JavaScript stringify, when you do the JSON stringify, that's when you're bringing it back into JavaScript.
Yeah, so let me extend this example here to sort of go into stringify a bit. So this line here, I'm taking my JSON string, I'm parsing it into my JavaScript object. If I did something like JSON string 2 equals JSON.stringify JavaScript object. So this line here and this line here are opposites. So I'm taking JSON string, I'm parsing it and converting it into JavaScript object. And then here I'm taking JavaScript object, I'm stringifying it into JSON string.
Okay.
So now if I go JSON string and JSON string 2, well, with the exception of that white space there, you'll see they're identical.
I want to write this. Oh, don't.
I'm going to paste this into Slack too.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Screenshot. Let's take a screenshot.
Yeah,
Oh
that
yeah,
might actually-
Command Shift 4.
Okay.
Why do I have to get ready and go to work? I'm just kidding.
All right, I'll grab it.
Okay, so that would basically, so optional next step. You might want me through that?
Yep, give me 1 second here. I just want to format this for whoever looks at this next. Sorry, folks. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. Oh wait, wrong one. This one. Okay. Optional next steps. Add a new entry to the pop-up array inside of the JSON string. This new entry should be an object containing 2 key value pairs. One with the key of label. Did my mic just cut out there for a second?
Mhm.
Okay, let me read that again. Sorry. Add a new entry to the pop-up array inside of the JSON string. This new entry should be an object containing 2 key value pairs. One with a key of label, which maps to a value of save, and one with an action key, which maps to a value of save doc. After doing this, reconvert the string into a JavaScript object and ensure that your object has a new entry in the array. Also, before I want to do this, this is an optional, one of the optional next steps thing. So this isn't a requirement, more just for folks who are curious or want to try to push themselves a little bit, but we'll go through it. So the goal with this exercise is to sort of give you an opportunity to try to modify this JSON string here by hand. In general, whenever you want to deal with JSON in a browser, you tend to take or in a JavaScript context, you take that JSON string, you parse it, and you sort of do whatever you want on the JSON itself. In practice, though, like reading through this, like this isn't completely opaque. Like the computer maybe needs you to parse it, but like you can read through this and sort of understand what this is doing here. And in practice, in like day-to-day activities as a software engineer, you end up doing a lot of sort of manually parsing strings like this kind of with your eyes to sort of understand what's going on. Just to make it a little bit clear, I'm going to replace these single quotes here with backtick quotes, and I'm going to indent this properly. You're familiar with backtick quotes, I think. So the big difference being you can make a multi-line string that's in backtick quotes. So I'm going to indent this and put some spaces in here, just so you can we can work on this a little bit easier. This isn't a requirement, but it tends to make these sorts of parsing by eye sort of tasks a little bit easier. Okay, new. So I'm just kind of going through and every single curly brace increasing indentation level, and every other way curly brace the other decreasing. Excuse me. Okay. And you can see here that it tells me the matching one, which is kind of helpful too. So I'm going to there, and there. Okay, there we go. That's nicely indented. So let's go through this. So we got an object at the outermost, at the very outside. And inside of that, we've got a key of menu. And the value is this whole thing right here. So the value is another object. Okay. So in this inner object here, we've got a key of ID mapping to a value of file, a key of label mapping to a value of file with an uppercase F, and then inside of this, a key pop-up that maps to an array. This array, the first element here has label and action keys. Second element here has label, and action. I screwed that up. That should be on the same line, but I think you probably see what's going on here. And the last one also has label and action keys. So looking at this just off the top of my head, this sort of seems like maybe a definition for like some sort of menu or something. Like there's sort of an ID that's called file, and like files is sort of menu, that thing maybe. And the label's file with an uppercase F. And then we've got sort of like new, open, close, and there's like these action values. Anyway, so it seems like there's sort of this is sort of like representing like a list of items shown under some sort of heading, maybe some sort of interesting way of representing that. But that's just sort of speculation. I think I actually stole this from like some bit of Google Docs or something, but I forget. Okay, anyway. So So let's read through the prompt here again. Add a new entry to the pop-up array inside of the JSON string. This new entry should be an object containing two key value pairs. One with a key label, which maps to the value of save, and one with an action key, which maps to the value of save doc. Okay. So this key here, pop-up, exists. It says the pop-up array. So I'm guessing like this array here.
Yeah, okay.
And then it says the new entry should be an object containing two key value pairs. Okay. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to start editing this here. So at the very end here, I'm going to put a new object. Okay. It said two key value pairs, one with the key of label, which maps to a value of save. Okay. So key label maps to value of save. Okay. So key colon values, do a comma. And then the other one was action key, which maps to value of save doc. Action, save doc. Something kind of like that, maybe. Okay.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
So I see label, I see the colons, then I see action. Tell me what label. I know that this key colon value, like, because we saw that in Postman, but label is what we want to call it, and then action is what we want it to do.
Well, so that would be a valid logical conclusion to draw. There's nothing in this format explicitly saying that is the case, but it seems like that's sort of what's going on here. Like each one of these entries has a label key, which maps to some that looks sort of like a plain text sort of label for maybe like a menu item or something. And then its action sort of key map to something that seems like some sort of interesting, like maybe like a function name or something.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I don't know exactly what this does. I'm just sort of following what exactly each of these means. I'm just following the instructions, but it's sort of up to the whatever sort of it's processing this JSON, whatever runs this resulting strings through json.parse, it's up to that code what this is actually going to do.
So okay, so when we're so coming from JavaScript, so like in JavaScript, if we put like open doc, that would be like an instruction, like get element ID or something. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, is this similar, like create new doc? So if we were in JavaScript and we were doing something and giving it a title and then putting something, is it along that same line, or is this something totally different?
I mean, I think you have the right idea.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, this is a little bit of a contrived example, and I'm realizing that maybe calling this using this particular example maybe makes this a little bit harder than it needs to be. But like, sort of taking this out of context for a second, like we don't know what these like action things are about. Like it maybe seems like a conclusion you could draw that they could be function names, sort of like what you're saying, but like forget about that for a second and just take this as like a literal sort of JSON document. They can have sort of whatever sort of keys and values you want in there, and whatever sort of data you'd like in there. The instructions just say to add some data into a certain place in the document. And we've done that. And what actually that would maybe do if this JSON was being parsed and used for something is sort of not something we can determine given the information in the exercise.
So this is just basically like, so this is a JSON string with a menu, an ID, a file, a label, ID file. So basically this is us setting this up. And if we were going to potentially run, use this code, we would be able to put what we needed behind the labels and behind the actions, and then it would do what we wanted it to do. So
Exactly.
this is just an example of what it should look like.
Yeah. And this is an
Okay.
example of a sort of thing you might configure using JSON data. Like you maybe would say like, oh, I'm going to specify a bunch of menu items, I suppose. And this might be a good way to do it versus sort of writing out like make menu item 1, make menu item 2. You might sort of define this all in sort of like a specification document.
So so when we hit enter on this, we don't expect for the homework, if we hit enter on this, we didn't expect that this was going to do something.
Correct.
We were writing this so that we would know how to write this.
Correct.
Okay. Then, whew.
Yeah. This may, I'm realizing like
Okay.
I had previous years I've used this example and students haven't had as many questions, but I'm realizing now in hindsight it's a little bit confusing, and maybe in the future I might want to switch it to a different sort of example.
Or
It's
let
not
us know
really
that it's just a
confusing. I
right.
feel like everybody is at different pace when it comes to Java, and that's what's making it difficult, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yep, that makes sense.
Perfect sense. It's like some persons are kind of like, oh yeah, I get this. Some persons are like, what the fuck is an object? This
This
an
is a
array?
correct
What the
format
hell?
exercise.
What's going on? Right. So honestly
Yeah.
though, I must say, talking to you has made what I'm looking at make sense.
That's good. Nice.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely that.
like, can I say that again? I'm actually looking at what I'm looking at and knowing what I'm looking at now for once. Like, all right, cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
I appreciate
Awesome.
that.
Well, so I think I entered this right, but there's only one way to find out, and that's let's try to parse it and see if the
Okay.
JSON parser parses it successfully. Because if I didn't format this correctly, the JSON parser is going to try to parse it and be like, wait a second, you didn't format this right. Here's a nice big error.
Right.
So I'm gonna hit enter. And if I log this out again, you'll see we have our big string, only it's got not quite as nicely printed. It's got some \n new lines in a lot of places, but still the same string. Okay, so I'm gonna go json.parse JSON string. And I'm gonna store this into my data. Sure. That's as good a name for a variable as any. Hit enter. Okay, things seem to work. So let's take a look at my data. Okay, so let's sort of walk through this object, keys and objects through each bit. So we've got our outer object here. It's got a key of menu and then a value of a bunch of stuff. So let's go into there. Okay, key of menu, value of this object right here. So we're gonna go in that object right there. Okay. Key of ID mapping to value. Key of ID mapping to value of file. Key of label mapping to value of uppercase F file.
Right.
Pop up here. You can see we got 4 items in this array, which is good. 1, 2, 3, 4. So things sort of looking good here. Let's open that up. Okay. So item 0, label is new, action create new doc. Label new, action create new doc. That looks right. Label open, action open doc. Label open, action open doc. Label close, action close doc. Label close, action close doc. Then our new one here, label save, action save doc. Label save, action save doc. So it looks like we did this all right here. So yeah.
What is prototype?
Oh, yes. Have you talked about JavaScript prototypes at all with Max?
I'm not gonna say no. but
Okay.
at this
Yeah,
moment,
I don't think we have.
I'm gonna say
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Let me give you the short answer. and-
Look, to be continued.
Let me give you the short answer, and if you want to hear the long answer, I'm more than willing to go into it. The short answer is it's a sort of JavaScript feature that allows certain underlying parts of JavaScript to work properly. In a representation like this, you can effectively ignore it. It's not going to sort of change anything that's going on here. Where it sometimes comes into play is when you're doing more complicated things around inheriting from objects. Like if you want to sort of make your own kind of string or something like that, it sometimes comes into play. But that's a more advanced topic that I don't think you've gotten into yet. I don't know if we're going to get into in careers in code.
Okay. Okay.
So
And
you
then
can ignore it.
object. So prototype and object, same thing, same rules apply. What happens when you click that arrow? Does something come?
Yeah, well, let's take a look. You see something like this.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah. In practice, at the level you folks are at, none of these are really all that important.
Okay.
But in the future, it might become a thing you'll have to worry about.
So yeah, now this makes way more sense because before, like, what in the world is going on? Okay, so then let me ask you this. So the let is that's us. We put that in, and then this JSON string right here is basically that's the parsing. This middle section is the parsing.
The part I have highlighted right now,
Yes.
so this is the JSON string just printed out. It's just printed out a little bit weirdly. So let me do this. Pretend instead of writing this, I wrote console.log JSON string.
Oh, okay.
Let me
So
show
then
you what that would look like.
Okay, so then that's what. Okay.
So this probably makes more sense to you, I would imagine.
Right. And then that's basically what that where it looks a little green tinted. That's basically what that is.
Yeah. Are you
Okay.
folks familiar with what \n means?
No.
Okay, let me do a quick little thing on that because it's kind of important.
Okay.
Let's say I have a string.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say my string. Actually, let me make that the variable name. I'm going to make my string hello world, something like this. Okay, pretty straightforward. Let's say I want to put a return in there. I want my string to be hello enter world. Okay. So one way I could do that is I could use backticks. And then in here, I could put a enter right there, something like that. And I can make my string hello enter world. That would work. And then if I print out console.log my string, I get hello enter world. Cool. Okay. Let's say I don't want to do it this way, or I'm in a sort of context where this isn't going to exactly work for one reason or another. There's another way you can do this. And this is sort of the more old-fashioned way you would do it. So there are, Max, I think, talked to you about how there's a bunch of different /escape things you have to do in JavaScript.
You know what? I have seen that \n now that you said that. It's a few of them. I saw. I actually have a list.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm 80% of the way there, so let me finish this up for anyone who's not familiar. Okay. So you've probably seen like double backslash. If you want to put a backslash in a JavaScript string, you need to use a double backslash.
Right.
And the reason why that is because the backslash is special, allows you to sort of escape things. So to put a backslash and you do a backslash to sort of escape, and then the backslash actually is the thing you want to enter. It turns out there's a bunch of these, and there's one called \n. And what \n means is a new line. So if I do hello \n world and log it out, I'm going to get the same thing I got before. Oh yeah, go ahead.
So going back to the code, the first code, is that still on there?
Let me enter it again here. Sorry, I got rid of it, but I can get it back. Got that.
So when you had that whole section there, so every /n means that, okay, so where you had ID file, then it was /n, label file /n, pop up /n, all those /n's just mean new line, new line, new line, new line.
Exactly. Yep.
Ooh,
Yeah, I didn't mean to do this, by the way. It just sort of, it would have been probably less confusing if I typed just console.log, but this is sort of the way that it writes it if you don't, if you have new lines in the string and you don't console.log it.
well, we need, well, good. This all worked out because I mean it's all stuff that needed to happen because we all needed to and so that /n is called an escape character.
Yep.
/b is a backspace.
/t is a tab. There's a bunch of
Okay.
them.
Okay, so yeah, so this code, can you this code that's here, can we share this so that we can have it too?
Yeah, I will put it in the.
Yes, this is okay. I feel much better.
Okay, something like that.
Okay, that makes so much more sense.
For exercise 3, I would guess that probably after just going through this, it's going to make some more sense. Exercise 3 is the same thing as exercise 2, but in the other direction. So exercise 3, you're given a JavaScript object, and you have to convert it into a JSON string. Where in exercise 2, you were given a JSON string, and now you convert it into a JavaScript object. So it's pretty much the same thing, but instead of json.parse, you want to use json.stringify. So the other one. So I can go through it, but I
But-
kind of wanted, oh, yeah.
So you say, okay, so when you say, so similar to what you put in, not this one. Let me see, I'm trying to see.
Let me.
So how we would write this out would be, we would put const dot JavaScript object equals JSON dot parse JString, or no?
For exercise 3,
Yes.
you would want to flip those. So it'd be something like const JSON string equals json.stringify JavaScript object.
And then once we wrote that out, then we would, I'm trying to see. So we would, okay, so we would start with this let, and then how?
So it would be something
Yeah,
sort
after
of,
we wrote it, after we wrote this initial let JavaScript object, we would put that in initially, and then we would hit enter, and then on the next line we would console log. I mean, we would const the, you said the JSON string equals the const JSON string equals JSON.stringify, and then the JavaScript object in the parentheses. Oh, yeah.
so this is what you just said, right?
Right.
Okay.
No.
Well, wait a second. Sorry, let's do that one more time. Now, if I log out JSON string, that looks right. Looks like something.
Okay.
So, and if I do type of JSON string, you'll see it's a string. So that's pretty much what you have to do for exercise 3. I'm not going to paste this in the chat though, because I want you all to figure it out on your own.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
like, I think I've given you enough of a playbook with what we did on exercise 2 for you to sort of flip it around and do this one.
Okay. Yeah, this is a whole lot more clarification.
Cool. Exercise 4. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was looking, I didn't know if somebody in the chat had a question. I wanted to make sure everybody got a turn. So I was just looking at that. I see Mel is monitoring it, so Mel is on it.
Mel's doing a good job as always. Exercise 4 is pretty much the same thing as this optional next step for exercise 2.
Okay,
So what you're doing for exercise 4 is sort of, and Stephanie, maybe we can go through part of exercise 4 if that'd be helpful for you. But you're sort of building a JavaScript object by hand. So it's another one of these cases of sort of trying to sort of test that you sort of understand sort of the JSON format to some degree here.
okay.
So let's say I told you as like a contrived example here, I wanted you to write a JSON object or write sort of a JSON string that within it had an object where there was a key of hello and a value of world. So what would you do in that case? Well, you probably start with a string. And then I said there's an object inside of there. So I'm going to do some open curly brace, close curly brace. Okay, we got our object. And I said there's a key hello that maps to a value world. So go back over here to our definitions, which I haven't been referencing this, but maybe should have been here. So JSON objects, they look like this. So the key is quoted, the value is quoted if it's a string. So I will, where was I here? There we go. So I said the key is hello and the value is world. So go quote hello, colon, world, something like that. And there we go, sort of built a JSON string here by hand. And if I really wanted to sort of test to make sure that was right, I could go json.parse and call it on that. Something that looked kind of right. So I can sort of be like pretty sure that it's good if json.parse gives me back what I expect. So for exercise 4, it's this, but a little bit more challenging. So if I have here, let's sort of start using your knowledge of the JSON format, build a JSON object by hand inside of a string. So JSON object, so curly braces go inside of there. Okay. So the JSON object contains a key of students that maps to a value of an array. Okay, so key students, if I can spell, yikes, that maps to a value of an array. Okay, so the value is an array, square brackets. Okay. I'll get to what's in the array then. So then the array contains a single value, a string of your name. Okay, so arrays, go back over here to arrays. An array is an ordered collection of values. Array begins with a single left bracket and ends with a single right bracket. So looks like this. So just sort of like JavaScript here, if I want to put something in there, do something like that. Okay. Okay, JSON object contains another key of instructor that maps to a value of Ryan. Okay, so if I want to have here keys and values, they're separated by commas. So the name value pairs are separated by comma. Okay, so comma, space, and space is optional, but I'll put it in there. Then I'll do instructor. So that's the key. The value is Ryan, something kind of like that. Okay. And then JSON object contains one final key of week number that maps to the value of 10. Okay, so just did this sort of key value thing. So week number. And this time it's a number, so I'm not going to put it in quotes. It's just a JSON primitive. I'm going to do 10, something kind of like that. Okay, so I sort of went through all the instructions here. So let's check our work and see if it worked. And how we're going to do that? Well, we're going to run it through json.parse. And if it parses, when we sort of type some valid JSON. So we'll say our JSON object, something like that. I'm going to go json.parse our JSON object. And it looks sort of like it might be right. Let me give you an example of what it would look like if it is wrong, though. So let's say I really royally screwed this up. Like maybe I forgot some quotes there. Maybe even like I forgot like a closing left brace. Like this would be some unfortunate JSON for the parser to give a try to parse here. So we'll do something like that. Okay. And I'll say uncaught syntax error. So this is what will sort of happen if it's unable to parse it. Unexpected token in JSON at position 34. So if I went 34 characters in, I would guess 34 characters in is right here. So in general, these JSON errors are going to be a little opaque and hard to sort of parse through. But if you can sort of assume for the most part, the JSON parser starts at the beginning of the string and works its way to the right. So if you're the parser and you sort of are going like character by character, imagine you get to this point. You're saying like, okay, we're starting a new array. So you say starting array. Okay, you come across a single quote. Okay, we're starting a string. You come across some stuff. There's another single quote. Okay, enter the string. Okay, so our first element in our array is this, comma. Okay, so the next element in the array. You come across quote. Okay, new string, instructor. Okay, end quote. Okay, that's the second item in our array. And then you come across a colon and you're like, wait a second, colon? That doesn't make sense in an array. I should be looking for like a close bracket. And this is when the parser gets confused. I would guess that's probably what's going on here, but that's just sort of a random off the wall guess. And I don't know for sure. Really the important thing here is there was an error parsing. So something's not quite right. And this might give you a clue as to what's going on. And you might ask, why was it trying to parse this as like an element in the array? And if you think back to what I was just saying, like going from the beginning to the end, there's nothing really saying explicitly right now with forgetting this left brace here that this isn't part of the array. Like sort of if you cover up everything after this point, you just look at everything beforehand. Like this seems like it could have been an item in that array. So it's just sort of interesting how leaving out some characters can really give a very different meaning to that JSON, or sort of start to give it a different meaning before it fails. So anyway, this is sort of roughly what the exercise 4 should look like. Hopefully that's helpful to folks.
Okay, I have another question.
Yeah.
My question is, okay, so on the previous one, we did, you used the menu. So the menu is like the beginning, like that's the title, or that's what you're working with? Is that?
The actual contents of the JSON object has no sort of like bearing, syntax bearing in JavaScript or anything like that. It's just sort of arbitrary keys and values where the meaning of what they actually do is completely domain specific. So it's completely specific to whatever's parsing the JSON.
Okay. And then once we get ready, so I know on the last one you used pop out, but on this one you used, I guess, students. So you use students, then you use a colon, and then you use the square brackets. The square brackets is what is going to enclose your array.
Yep. Yeah, and I want to say again that like the whole pop-up students menu, like those strings don't have any intrinsic meaning. They are just examples sort of in the JSON document. And those strings, oh gosh, why does this keep falling out of my ear? Sorry, folks. Those strings are just part of the example. And like there is, what I'm trying to make sure doesn't happen is I don't want someone to come away from this being like, oh, every JSON.
Specific, right? It's not specific, but it relates to what you're actually writing.
Yeah. I don't want someone to come out of this thinking like, oh, every JSON sort of document has a menu key in it, or every JSON array sort of is like has strings or a certain number of things long. No, none of that is like JSON can be whatever sort of structure you want. And the structure that your document is totally dependent on the use case in which it's being used.
Okay.
So I think I don't think anyone's coming away with those conclusions, but I just want to make sure.
Okay, and then this is my last question.
Mhm.
Well, I think it's my last question. So in Free Code Camp, is there something, I know we have these, but we usually have some homework in Free Code Camp. I feel like I saw something that had JSON attached to it, but would you recommend that we do the Free Code Camp exercises that contain JSON?
I don't off the top of my head know what those exercises are. I
Mhm.
would say it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Mhm.
I would guess it's probably more likely that the exercises in Free Code Camp around JSON are probably closer to exercise 6 here in the assignment.
Okay.
So to maybe touch on that real quick, because exercise 6 was the let's go for gold and give everyone something that really ties everything together. And hopefully some folks will get it exercise.
Okay.
I wasn't sure how it would be received.
Okay.
But so what the plan with exercise 6 is I was hoping you all could make a request to an endpoint I wrote on that careersincode.ml server called number list. And I'm going to here open up Postman and make a request to this and show you what this returns. Because this is where stuff starts to get kind of cool. Okay, so I'm just gonna make a get to it. Send. Okay, and what you'll see is the response body of this request, of this is an array, a JSON array, and you've got a bunch of numbers in that array. Okay, so it's in JSON, but it's like pretty straightforward JSON, just an array. And also as a side note, if I jump over here, or wait, where was it? Oh, nah, never mind. Okay. So the goal with exercise 6 is to make this request using fetch, get the body from the HTTP response, decode it as JSON. And once you have that numbers list data in your web browser, to write some JavaScript to act on it. So in this case, loop over all those numbers and add them up, sort of come up with the sum of what all those numbers are all added together. And then to tell me that result and show me the code you used to do it. So the reason why this is sort of tying everything together is now you're starting to do something where in a web browser, you're making a request to a third-party service, you're getting data it gave you back, and you're doing something with that data. And in practice, this exercise is like a hair's width away from that New York Times project. In practice, you're doing a lot of the same fundamental pieces. The only thing the New York Times project will add on top of it is some maybe slightly fancier rendering and a little bit of CSS and stuff like that. But like you're very close with exercise 6 to that project. So I'd be more than willing to talk a little bit about exercise 6 if any folks would like. But also I kind of would like to see a lot of you folks just give it a shot and see how successful you'd be. Okay, I'm seeing someone saying yes in chat. Anybody else? Is that a yes? Okay. Okay. Okay, fine, fine. Ruined my fun. Sigh. Cool. Let me make this one in an HTML page because this is sort of might be helpful to, might be emblematic of what you do for the New York Times project. Okay, yes, code, I think. Okay, I'm just gonna use the same one here. And also, like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to have a body tag and HTML tag and all that, but whatever. I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, make a GET request to the server's number list endpoint. So fetch, that's the first part. We gotta make a request with fetch. So what are the options to fetch? There are two options you pass into fetch. Let me see if I can find the slide here with it. Oh, I'm also just realizing I forgot to turn on automatic captioning. That was probably an important thing. Oh, well, we're kind of at the end. I guess I can turn it on now. Live transcript, that's it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Come on, where is it? That'll work. I was sort of looking though for this. Yeah. Or this. Yeah. So there are two options to fetch. The first one being the URL you want to make a request to. The second being a bunch of options. And that bunch of options, you can give it a method, you can give it headers, you can give it a body, all this sort of stuff. So in our case, we're just going to make a get to number list, and that's it. So this is just about sort of the easiest kind of request you can make. There's no authorization, no fancy headers required. We're just making a get to number list, and it's going to give us back a bunch of data. This is pretty similar to the request you're going to make for the New York Times project too. Wait, oh yeah, that was in here. Okay, so first parameter is our URL, so the string, and the second parameter is some options. It's an object. So what's our URL? Well, I'm going to go steal it from Postman. I don't want to type it again. But careersandcode.ml/number list. Okay, cool. Our options, method, headers, body. So what were those defaults again? So method defaults to get. So we're doing a get, so I guess we don't need to type a method. Headers defaults to no headers. We're not entering any custom headers, so that's probably fine. Body defaults to an empty body. Well, it's a get request, there's no body, so that's kind of fine too. So we don't need to give it any options for us. The second parameter here, you can actually just get rid of it altogether, in fact. But we're just making just a straightforward get request to a thing. Okay. So let's take this. Let's put this into a variable called promise here, something like that. Let me see if I can make this a little wider too. See if, okay. Go promise dot then. Something sort of like this. This should probably look familiar, I would hope, because it's a lot like some of the homework assignments you did here. Should also look a lot like this slide. Actually, almost exactly like this slide. Okay, I'm not going to do status just because that's going to be easier to look at here. Let's take a look at, if I open this up and I, where was this? It was in my home folder, I think. Yeah, here we go. Okay. 200. Okay, very nice. So far, I'm hoping this is relatively straightforward. There's no sort of big surprises. And can I get a thumbs up on that if I'm right? Okay, cool. Sweet. So next thing is I need to get that data that comes back from the response. So not the status. Well, also I should say status 200 there. So 200 starts with 2, things are good. Status was 200 here. So just to check to make sure everything worked. But but we need to get that data that came back in the response. So you can go look at the slide and see how you do it. Something kind of like this. So I'll copy this here. I don't want to type it all again. Okay. Okay. Something kind of like that. We save that there and reload this. Okay. So we got back some what looks to be a JSON string here. Got a square bracket, and we've got a bunch of numbers and then a closing square bracket there. So very good. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. This should look pretty familiar. But now we've got this text here, and this text is a string. But it just happens to be a string that contains some JSON. So what if, I mean, in the past, when we've sort of been doing these exercises here, if we have a string and it contains JSON and we want to turn it into a JavaScript object, how do we do that? What do we use? What function? Go from JSON string to JavaScript object.
Stringify?
Other
This-
one,
The parse?
parse.
Ah,
So let's do this. Let's go JSON equals, wait, no, I'm gonna go JavaScript script array. Let's make this a little less confusing. And I'll go JSON.parse text, something kind of like that. I'm gonna log out JavaScript array. Okay. So the only thing we've done here now, instead of logging out text, we're running text through JSON.parse into storing it in the JavaScript array and logging out JavaScript array. So what's going on here and what was going on before is very similar. It's just now, notice here, this is like sort of white in color. Okay, it's sort of like just a string. Now if I reload this, now it's an array. It's got 21 items. I can sort of look inside of it. This is now an array. It's not a string. So this is important here because what JSON.parse let us do is it let us take that string that came back in the response and convert it into data we can now use in a JavaScript context to do cool things. Does that make sense?
mhm.
Okay. Now, let's do something cool. And that cool thing we're going to do is we're going to loop over this array. And we're going to take all these numbers, we're going to add them up and figure out the total. Okay. Now, I'm not going to write this code. I want you guys to tell me how you would do this. How, like, from what all the stuff Max has told you, how would you loop over an array? What's sort of like the way you've done that? I'm also asking because there's like 5 ways, and I want to know which one you guys have talked about.
For loop.
Okay. So like for,
We did 2 of them. There's one where it starts with a variable and adds to it
okay.
for an index. The other
Okay.
was for
For of maybe?
element of, yeah.
Yeah.
Array name.
Okay. Let's do that one. That one's probably going to be a little bit easier. So
I was gonna say, I have a cheat sheet. My cheat sheet says on the for loop, it has before loop, condition for loop, execute after loop, or what to do during the loop.
yep, yeah. So that's the index kind. I mean, we can do that. We could do that one too if that one's.
Oh, no,
looks a
I was
little
just
familiar.
saying that there was, that's what it says for the for. I was just reading off what my cheat sheet said. That didn't mean that I wanted to go that route.
Okay, fair enough. Well, so if I want to do one of those for of loops, someone tell me what I should type here. And you can call the variables whatever you want, it doesn't matter here. But how do I do a for of loop to loop over every item in that array?
for const num, or it's an array of numbers, right?
Yep.
Num of, what is the array name? JavaScript array.
Okay. And
Are we gonna do like a concat, or like we're gonna do like a plus equal thing with this?
yeah, we are. This is like a perfect use for a plus equal. We're gonna get there though. We're just
Oh,
gonna start by
okay.
logging out every item in the array.
Okay.
So let's just log out num. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, that I think was it. Someone was recently asking me like, why is plus equal useful? I don't know if that was you or like if that was
Wasn't
Chris in
me.
code or.
I don't know. It wasn't me.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. But this is like a great place where it would be. Okay, but let's start here. So we're just going to log out every number in the array. So this should be pretty straightforward, I think. Let's save this. Let's reload this. Okay, very cool. And if we click on one of these guys here, you'll see, yep, it's that line in which is making those logs.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back over to our editor here. So now we're looping over every item in the array, but we still need to sort of compute that total. And you had a good insight, which is that we need to use plus equal. So we need to sort of make some sort of variable to store like our total, and then do something like add that num value every loop iteration into that total. And then when we're done, we sort of have that total and we can do something with it. So having sort of walked you through that, I'm going to have you folks tell me how to write this code. So the first line here, we need to create a new variable, maybe called something like total, and set it equal to 0. So what would I type to do that? Create a new variable, call it total, set it equal to 0.
So would it be var? No.
I'm just going to type what you tell me. But you're on the
So
right
we
track.
do like num total or something? Num NUM capital TO. They say var num total.
Zach posted in chat, var total equals 0, and that would totally work. So I'm going to go with that.
And then
Now, if I want to every single loop iteration, take num and then add the total, what would I do?
num plus equals something. I don't know. Somebody else has to tell you the other side. I just know num plus equals. Num plus equals total.
Like that?
Maybe. No.
What do you think? Anybody have any
Oh,
thoughts?
num plus equals JavaScript array. No.
No. Let's keep moving here. So then at the very end, let's log out total. Okay, something like that. Okay.
Okay.
Let's run it. Let's see what happens. Actually, I'm gonna just to make this a little easier to see. I'm gonna go total like this, just so you have a little prefix in front of it, so it doesn't look like all these other values here. Okay. Refresh. Assignment to constant variable on line 14. Okay,
No.
so there's something weird here with our num plus equals total deal.
So just doing this in my exercises.
Well, let me say one thing here. So what num plus equals total means is it means take the value num and then increment it by whatever is in the value total.
So then that's wrong. So how about JavaScript array plus equals total?
Let's try that. So it's still assignment to constant variable, line 14. So still the same line. So I don't know if that helped.
So we need to pull those numbers. I'm not sure. I'm confused right now, but I know that we need to take those numbers and then the plus minus will give us the total of the numbers. So I don't know. I think I'm not knowing how to write it, but I know what it needs to do.
Yeah, well, let's forget about the plus equals for a second. Let's
Okay.
just write it as just a sort of assignment. So if I want to, let's start here. Let's say every loop iteration, I want to just increment total. How would I do that? Just like add 1 to total.
0. No, so would you do 0 plus?
So Zach says plus plus. So like total plus plus like that. That could work.
So that would be each. So you would start with the first one, which is the first instance, and then you would just keep adding. It would plus plus just continue to keep adding each number until you got to the bottom of the array.
Well, plus
So
plus
that's
will add 1. So what this will do is effectively total will be equal to the number of items in JavaScript array, or the number of loops that happened here. And that's not what we want, but that's a place to start. So let's save this. Let's jump over here. Okay, now our code's running. It says total 21, and there's 21 items in the array.
So we added up how many numbers there were.
Yeah, we did, which isn't what we want, but it's a place to start. So let's say instead of adding 1, we want to add 2 every loop iteration. And yeah, you could do total plus plus twice, but that's cheating. Like, tell me, how would you add 2 here?
Okay, so let me ask you a question first. That very first number represents 0, right? In the array. The very first number in the thing. And then it goes down to 21. So we want to add 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 all the way down to 21, right?
Yeah, you want to add the items in the arrays at those indices, but yes. So like we want to add 7529 plus 5824 plus 78 plus and so on and so forth.
So what we want to do here is assign like we want to pull each value out of the array. Like there's 0, 1, 2 is like the first 3 items in the array. We want to pull each of those out and then sub in those, like the actual value for that placeholder, so that we're not just adding like 0 plus 1 plus 2, where we want to add the actual values themselves. So like the total plus plus is identifying each of those placeholders, right? And then we have to find some way to pull each of those values.
The good news is we are pulling those values out already. You can see that we're logging them out here. And that's what num is equal to. So const num of JavaScript array, this is going to loop over JavaScript array, and every item in the array is going to be set equal to num, and this below code is going to run. So the first loop, num, is going to be equal to 7529, and this is all going to run here. And the second loop, num, is going to be equal to 5824, and it's going to run. And this is going to happen 21 times.
Right.
So what I'm looking to do is something like, I want to take num and I want to add num to total. Sort of, I want to take the result, I want to take like the current total, and I want to add num to it, and then I want to put that back in a total. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I've seen this in the free code camp exercise. I just don't recall how to write it.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's do this. What if we did something like const new total? And the sort of new total is going to be total plus. What do you think the second part of this is?
Num.
Exactly. Yeah, num. So new total is total plus num. So this is sort of our new total we've calculated. Then we could do something like total equals new total. So like we sort of computed our new value, and then we're going to take this new value and we're going to reset total to be equal to it.
Mhm.
So if we save this, we run this. Now we got something that's sort of starting to look right here. And what's nice about this exercise is you could actually go through and add all these numbers up and verify this value if you wanted to.
Mhm.
I happen to know that this is the right value, but you could go through and check it for yourself if you'd like. Let's take this a little bit further here, though. So this is cool, but we can simplify this. So we're calculating something, putting it into a variable, and then setting another variable equal to that variable.
Mhm.
What if we just get rid of a lot of this complexity and just do this? So the only thing I'm doing is I'm making a new variable, and I'm using that variable. I'm just taking this and moving it over here. So instead of making a temporary variable, I'm just reassigning the total right off the bat.
Okay.
And this might look weird to some folks, especially if you're like into math or sort of you have a math way of thinking about things, because in math, this is not something you would ever see. Like you're saying like A is equal to A plus B. And that's just like not a thing you tend to do in a math context. But this is different, or it's sort of the way that software treats this way of writing things is different. The way you have to think about this is you compute what's on the right side, and then you take what's on the right side and you assign it to be you assign the thing on the left side to be equal to it. So total on the right side here means something different than total on the left side here. And these are not equivalent things. On the right side, this total means the current value of total. On the left side, this means the variable of total. So you are taking the current value of total, you are adding num to it, and you're taking this whole value on the right and assigning it, putting that value into the variable total. It just happens these happen to be the same name, but this could be like something else. And if it's something else, this seems a lot less confusing, probably, I would guess.
So could we look at it like 0 equals 0 plus number?
I would
No.
say that would, a better way to look at it would be like total equals like 0 plus number.
Okay.
You shouldn't think of these as the same thing. They
Okay.
like have the same.
Total on the right is 0, and the total on the left doesn't mean the same thing.
The total on the left is a variable called total. So
Okay.
if we were to walk through this a few times, like this code right here, we start by setting total equal to 0.
Mhm.
And then we do a bunch of looping around. And what we do is we get sort of our number, or get our number there. We log it out. Okay, cool. We get to this line. So total at this point is 0. Let's say our first number was 7529.
Mhm.
What we do is we compute what's on the right side here. So 0 plus 7529 is obviously 7529.
Mhm.
So pretend now this is like this.
7 times plus num.
No. This is the
Oh.
result of this is
Mhm.
7529. So I guess maybe like 0.
Okay, now you're saying we got to loop around again and add it to.
Yeah. So you take the result of this here, you store it
Mhm.
in a total. Okay.
Mhm.
Then you loop around again. So now our next number is 5824. So at this point, total is 7529.
Mhm.
So now plugging this in, we've got 7529 and then 5824. I think that's what it was. 5824. Yeah. So now you compute this, which is
Loops around.
this value.
Okay.
And now you store that into total. And you
Mhm.
loop around again and again and again. And you can see how sort of that results in total incrementing by num each time.
Okay.
Does that make sense to folks? Give me a thumbs up if that was helpful.
It makes a lot of sense.
Cool.
It makes a lot of sense because you're here. It does not make a lot of sense when we're alone. That's the problem.
Yeah, these are the sort of things where, like, I think 80% of software is just figuring out a bunch of these sort of patterns like used over and over again and sort of getting really comfortable with them. And then once you do, it's just sort of taking these patterns, sort of like organizing them, figuring out how they fit together and just applying them and using them. This sort of pattern is sort of A equals A plus something pattern to increment a variable is a very common one. In fact, it's so common that, bringing this full circle, there's a way to make the shortcut for it that plus equals. So this and this mean the same thing.
Okay.
I would say if you're not really all that familiar with this yet, I would say avoid this, the second one, the plus equals, and do it this way. Plus equals is fine. It's more just, this is sort of what's actually going on under the scenes, or behind the scenes, under the hood, mixing metaphors. And once you have once you just look at this and see, oh, this is incrementing, then plus equals, like, it's just a shortcut for that. But the concern is, if you use plus equals and you don't really understand what's happening, Christy, like what you did before when you gave me that plus equals, you flipped the order of the arguments. And because you did, it resulted in some weird behavior. If you do it this way, if you flip the order of the arguments, you can think through it and sort of step by step and realize what you did. The plus equals is a little harder to do that way.
Okay.
So anyway, that's basically what exercise 6 looks like, something kind of like this. I'm also tempted to not paste this one because I want you guys to figure it out on your own. I mean, you have the recorded video, the office hours. We sort of went through it step by step. In general, I got a lot of thumbs up saying that folks broadly understood what was going on. So I don't know. I'd like you guys to try this one on your own. But yeah, Slack's available for questions, and I'm around. So
yes, I feel like I understand Fetch and JSON a whole lot better now.
that's awesome.
So what do we need to do to take a vote and add another week? Because I know for a fact, if we didn't know this much, we need more time.
Yeah, well, here's what I will say. And this is not going to help you now, but you should tell that to Max, because last cohort I had 2 weeks and he only gave me 1 week. And when I heard that, I had a, oh shit, I got to make this in 1 week. How's that going to work, sort of thing.
So we all need to fill out the feedback form and say, we want Ryan for another week.
Well, you should say that in the future, this needs to be 2 weeks. And I would love to come back and be with you guys for a little bit longer. But unfortunately, I'm traveling further next week and I'm not going to be super available. What I will say, though, is Slack's open. If you have questions, I'm around. I will say that right now I'm on Pacific time. But if and so my availability is not quite what I would hope it would be. But if you want to set up a one-on-one, I'll try to be as available as I can there.
Okay, and do you have like the Calendly like everybody else?
I still haven't set one of those things up. I probably need to. If you send me a message in Slack,
we can
figure it out. I know it's old school, but I'm not as fancy as Max.
I feel like office hours was very, very I've been waiting for 5 o'clock. Like I was sitting here like, okay, 5 o'clock yet. So I don't know if everybody else felt the same way, but yes. Okay.
Awesome.
I feel better, much better.
That's great.
Who else is here? I hope they feel better too.
Anybody else have anything else they'd like me to talk about or cover? I don't really have an end stop here. I mean, at some point I do, but Cool. Well,
I have some questions, but I think they're a little outside the scope of what we covered during the week, so I don't want to.
yeah. So
I'll take it to Slack.
okay. Just because other folks might be interested, in the background, Doug and I have been having some conversations. Doug wants to make something that connects to the Meetup API. And we've sort of been talking about how one would go about doing that. And it's sort of, Doug, you're getting a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be doing on Monday, like interfacing with other APIs. And the sort of like general TLDR I'll give to the group in prep for Monday is like, in an academic setting, all the stuff just seems so like perfect and like, oh, we'll just do the thing that you're supposed to do. In practice, no one ever follows any of these rules. Everything is like, yeah, go ahead.
I can't get past the step of getting an access token to make my first API call.
Yeah.
So I'm like stalled at the starting gate.
Yep. Yeah. And on Monday, we're going to be trying to get API tokens for the New York Times API. And I will let Mel sort of comment, but this has like always been such a frustrating thing because their tools like kind of work. Like New York Times doesn't put a lot of time and effort into like their API, it turns out, which sucks. So you sort of go through this like step-by-step setup process and you like sort of use their tool and it's a little broken. And like, eventually, if you get lucky and you refresh things just right, you get your token and you're like, okay, I finally have my token. And now you're like, okay, so what's the request I need to make again? And you sort of have to play around in Postman. And eventually, if you get lucky, you get back the data you want. So we're going to go through that on Monday and it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question. So for my capstone, I was toggling between doing like a bike app and then pulling in bike routes, but then I thought that bike routes wouldn't be interesting. So I thought about doing like you know how Oprah has her favorite things?
Mm-hmm.
I thought about doing like Christie's favorite things and then picking like maybe 20 things and then being able to pull. So I would, in essence, I guess I would be pulling from different APIs, like not just the one New York Times APIs. I would have to pull from like whatever, I would have to pull from multiple APIs at that point.
Potentially, it depends on how you do it. So what I will say is almost definitely there's going to be an API you're going to end up writing later on in the class, and your application is going to talk to that API. Whether or not you want to talk to other APIs, things like maybe New York Times, things like maybe Amazon API, I don't know like what sort of services that would be helpful there. Like that might be important or it might not. It sort of depends on the scope of what exactly you're doing.
Definitely Amazon, definitely. I don't think New York Times. I mean, I do have a book, but I think I could get if I had a favorite book, I'm sure I could pull it from either Amazon or somewhere else. Like,
yeah,
I see Amazon. I could see Amazon because I'm ordering off of Amazon a couple times a week, so I could see that.
okay, yeah. Maybe start doing some research into sort of APIs or third-party services you want to integrate with, and look at their documentation. Most likely you'll start to see things like, here's an example curl you can use to make a request to our service. Or if you don't see that, you'll at least see something like, here's the URL you make a request to. You need to use this method with this body, with this, with this, that.
Oh, they tell you what you need to make the request. Okay,
Yep.
okay. My favorite things might change then to accommodate. Okay, I got that. That was helpful. Okay.
Cool. Okay, sweet. Well,
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
I
No problem.
appreciate you. I gotta
Cool.
go. Yeah,
We got-
stuff, but
Yeah. See you, folks.
All
Bye.
right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.